We are about to hear Cormac McCarthy discuss the problems of finding success while you are still young. And then we are going to have a discussion about Cormac McCarthy's theory through the lens of legendary writers who found success while they were still young and see if his theory holds up. And if you are a McCarthy fan, you have come to the right place. On this channel, we have McCarthy book breakdowns, series on aspects of his work, forthcoming interviews with McCarthy scholars, and a ton of other really cool stuff. So subscribe, of course, if you guys are interested. And on Tuesday, November 22nd, next week, I will be launching a Cormac McCarthy course at a discounted price of $5 a month to start, with a discussion group, exclusive content, and a bunch of other fun stuff. And actually a line of Cormac McCarthy t-shirts I've been working on for months now. So if you guys want more information about that, sign up to the newsletter down below and I will send you an email when all that stuff comes out. And let's hear from Cormac now.
But that's interesting, again, talking about Wittgenstein in respect to Russell.
Okay.
And then, Heisenberg in respect to his superiors. You like these kind of young mavericks who are overturning received wisdom. You're drawn to that kind of character, to a kind of, I don't know if that's iconoclasm or if it's just a super intelligent disregard for the status quo.
Well, I think what happens to physicists, among other things, is that if you have some success when you're young, several things happen. One of them is that if you figure out a really difficult problem in physics when you're 21 years old, you're going to carry that with you for the rest of your life, and you're going to think that that's how you do physics. But that's not how you do physics. That's how you do that problem in physics. Mm-hmm. And the other problem is that if you're really successful, you build this worldview that everything has to fit.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody who has not had this success and having people, pat you on the back, they don't care. You're more like Heisenberg. Anything's possible.
Right, so you're not fenced in by your accomplishments.
By your own success.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Is it inevitable? Are there any instances of...
I think it's a problem, and I think not all people who have success in different fields understand the problem. And if you don't understand the problem, you certainly can't do anything about it.
And guys, the problem is worse than ever. I can't even explain to you. I want to cry right now because it has gotten so bad, especially for young people. If we look at Cormac McCarthy's career, he did not publish The Orchard Keeper until he was 32 years old. He did not get any money or find any financial stability until he was in his 50s when he got a MacArthur Fellowship. He did not sell more than 5,000 copies of one book until he was in his 60s when All the Pretty Horses sold 200,000 copies in 6 months. If you guys know author royalty rates, that means that Cormac McCarthy made less than $10,000 from Blood Meridian from 1984 to 1992 when All the Pretty Horses came out. How much dedication does it take in your soul to write one of the greatest literary masterpieces of all time and earn $6,000 or $7,000 for it over the course of 8 years? But McCarthy is not shook by that because he is not writing for the audience. He waited and cultivated himself and spent time out in nature, as we are going to discuss, to prevent himself from having these problems. Because McCarthy was working on Suttree when he was in his mid-20s, and there are early drafts out there. And he actually abandoned it because it did not have the magic that we know now. And then he worked on The Orchard Keeper and Child of God, and then released that, probably 12 or 13 years after some of those early drafts. But what if he released one of those early drafts and McCarthy became a celebrity, right? He sold millions of copies of that book. Would he have had as successful of a literary career in terms of merit and objective material if that would have happened? And the answer is absolutely not. And we are fueling today's younger generation with so much bullshit that I don't know if we can expect any great writers to really come out of that generation, or at least as many, because we all know what happens to people who find success when they are too young, especially, actors, musicians, NFL players, that a narcissistic quality starts to grow. We see this with influencers, but McCarthy was talking about physicists, and McCarthy is a writer. And when you look at those two fields, those are very introverted individuals. And being a famous physicist or writer doesn't mean that people are going to even know you if you go to the store. But as McCarthy just talked about, is that if you find success when you're young, you feel like the way you are writing is the way to write to be successful or to do a good job. You start to become stagnant, or you start looking at all other physics problems the same way, as McCarthy just said. And it's such a terrible thing, because what it does is actually create immense writer's block, because you might be able to get a couple, big breakthroughs in physics or a couple good novels out of you. But once you are done and you're stuck with a style that needs to be reinvented, but to reinvent that style, you have to invest thousands of hours of solitude and silence and studying of grammar and sentences and searching within your soul and out in nature to make that quantum leap. Then a lot of people get scared of that and don't do that. And back in the day, those people would fade into obscurity. But now they get professor positions. Now there are ways that you can settle in as a writer or a thinker that doesn't need to work. And I have so many young students, everybody, who are in high school, and I tell them, I'm like, hey, if you keep writing for a couple decades, if you just keep up a daily habit or write a couple times a week, in a decade or two, I think that you could be releasing spectacular stuff. And what you're doing right now is spectacular. But if you keep working at this, you can do this. That's all I say. But then I've had so many parents come up to me and treat their student who is a good writer like they are going to be in the NFL. Like they are like the annoying sports parent. They're like, what do we need to do? And, I want to say, we need to get them in a couple of abusive relationships, get, a little bit of substance abuse. They don't need to talk to you for a couple years. They need to live in abject poverty for probably some of that. And they need to spend a bunch of time alone in a room away from everyone. And that might cause depression, obesity, and a bunch of other problems. And if they make it through all of that with a sound mind, sound heart, and aren't addicts and aren't scared from all the trauma, then I think that they could maybe be a successful writer. But, what do you say to that question? Like, it's always just, they need to continue to read and write. But when we look at McCarthy's lineage, if we look at a hero on this channel, Henry David Thoreau, and what he did out at Walden Pond and his approach to nature, that's a part of the American spirit. Henry Melville did not publish Moby Dick, McCarthy's favorite novel, his greatest inspiration, until he was 31 or 32 years old. He didn't find success in his life at all. If we look at Kafka, if we look at all the authors we cover on this channel, Jung, Murakami, Robert Bly, none of them were publishing major works until they were after 30 years old. They had time to cultivate themselves. And now all these problems are exponentially increased because of the narcissistic environment that's created by social media. If you were a young writer right now, you would want to find success and put things out faster and with less quality because, one, there are a ton of social benefits to being an author. And with social media, if you get a little bit of fame, there's a lot of benefits. McCarthy writing The Orchard Keeper, when you hear him talk about it, people ever said to him was like, man, that's a really weird book. Like, you don't seem like the type of guy to write that book. But if you write a novel today that finds some success and you're on social media and stuff, men or women are going to be sliding into your DMs. Your sex life is going to increase. You're going to be able to live actually a distinguished artistic lifestyle that was not available to even great authors and people of the past who even were famous because no one knew who they were or no one really cared. And we didn't have this instant access. I remember Stephen King saying the worst regret he had of his career was doing like a MasterCard or Visa commercial because then everyone knew who he was. He basically went his whole life with no one knowing who he was except a random fan every once in a while. But once he was on TV and they played it at the Super Bowl, everywhere he went, everyone knew he was Stephen King. And this is something that we all have to remember because maybe you're not a writer, but you hopefully should be aspiring to some artistic pinnacle in your life. And that aspiration should be one that is slow. One that does not create pain and forcefulness in your life. Sometimes I'm trying to write and my cats are just being absolute jerks, or there's just everything's going wrong in my life and I can't just sit down and do it or have any time during the day to relax and like get my stuff done. But when I tell myself like, hey, Ian, you have 6 more decades to put out your best work, then that makes me happier toward my cats and my wife and my life. And I don't have that pressure. And then it helps me actually write more and have less pressure. When you tell yourself that you don't need these things, then it works out a lot better in the long run. And it's like, if you do find success while you're young, you don't have to buy into all the BS. You don't have to become a sellout and follow all the political fetishes that your audience wants you to get into, or all these other rabbit holes that, once again, if we think of some of your favorite authors. How many hours a day do they watch TV? How into politics are they? When you start looking at a lot of the things that we waste our time with, and a lot of people in the world just get sucked into, there's a stark contrast with the great artists of our time and the modern human in terms of time management and where they put their energy. And it's the same thing for you. What are you going to do in your life? And I know that's the first rule of YouTube. Don't break down the fourth wall and ask people to self-reflect. But I know that you sometimes are forcing things way too much. I do it all the time, at least once a day, if not once every other day. I am just forcing things. I say, I'm going to release 30 videos today for this channel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And that is not the way. You have something special within you, but it's going to take a lot of time to get that out. You know, we are told all the time, you're so special, you're the best. But unless you are the best, unless you are actually special, then you aren't. You are a unique human being, but you have to make yourself special. And the highest success rate for doing that is taking things really slow and not trying to be special, but just following your own interests, following your heart and your path. And eventually you'll wake up one day and be transcend. So if you guys like this video, give it a like and then say what's up in the comments and have a great slow day.